To start, there's been a new update from the Space Observation System concerning the Schumann resonances. If you caught my last video, you'll remember we talked about the code red signal that came through, something that typically shows up just before a high-magnitude earthquake. But interestingly, that data has since vanished. We'll explore what that might mean. Now, turning our attention to solar activity, the sun has been pretty intriguing lately. There's a massive sunspot group, AR 4079, sitting in the Earth-facing strike zone. While it's been surprisingly quiet, it still holds the potential to release a powerful solar flare and possibly eject a significant coronal mass if it decides to stir. For now, though, it remains calm. Just behind that region is a coronal hole in the sun's southern hemisphere. Even if 4079 stays inactive, we're likely to see a boost in solar wind from that coronal hole once it moves into a more geo-effective position. In fact, we're already feeling some of that solar wind as we speak. We've been experiencing elevated solar wind speeds for several days now, with heightened geomagnetic activity continuing throughout this period. You may have noticed it energetically or physically. It's been an intense few days. Earlier today, the sun released a small plasma filament. It's not very clear in the coronagraph imagery, but it could bring a little stealthy solar storm our way. This would come on top of the current solar wind activity, potentially amplifying what's already in motion. Shifting focus to seismic activity, we've had a magnitude 6.0 earthquake off the west coast of South America, a 5.8 in Mexico, and prior to that, a 5.4 in Texas near the New Mexico border. That last one was felt by a lot of people across the US. We'll discuss what might be connecting all these recent seismic events. Let's now switch over to the 171 angstrom view of the sun to take a closer look at the latest activity as of just a few hours ago. There's a very thin, almost delicate-looking plasma filament visible near the equator of the sun. It launched from a spot fairly close to center Earth direction, which means it could tweak the solar wind dynamics just a bit more. While it doesn't stand out much in the coronagraph, there's a subtle push that suggests we might see a little solar enhancement heading our way. That said, the real feature to keep an eye on remains sunspot 4079. It's the biggest player on the field right now, even if it hasn't done much yet. When it first rotated into view from the eastern limb, it gave off a few low M-class flares, but since then, it's been nearly silent. That's unusual for a sunspot of this size, and although it's continued to grow a bit, its dormancy is puzzling. However, that doesn't mean it's safe to ignore. This region still holds the energy for significant solar flares. Looking back over solar cycle 25, we've seen some major X-class flares emerge from much smaller and less complex sunspots. So, while 4079 hasn't made a move yet, it absolutely has the ingredients to do so. Whether or not it will act while still in that Earth-facing zone is another story. Think of the sunspot like a cannon. The sun is the weapon. The sunspot is the loaded barrel. The question now is, will it fire? The window of opportunity for an Earth-directed event is narrowing quickly. As the sunspot rotates further along the solar disk, it will eventually enter the radiation strike zone. If it flares there, it could trigger a significant radiation storm on Earth, meaning a surge of protons, electrons, and heavier ions flooding into our atmosphere. That's something we definitely keep a close watch on. We have AR 4079 front and center, with AR 4081 and 4082 also visible. The sunspot numbers on the Earth-facing side have actually gone back up again. Just a few days ago, they were pretty low, but today we're back over 100, which is a noteworthy climb. Whether any additional sunspots are about to rotate into view remains to be seen. Zooming into the magnetogram, we can see how the magnetic fields are behaving. Positive polarities show up in green and blue, while negative polarities appear in yellow, orange, and red. The darker and more saturated these colors, the stronger the magnetic field in that area. For reference, normal polar magnetic field strength tends to be around 0.5 to 1 Gauss. But in these sunspot regions, fields can climb as high as 1,000 to 3,000 Gauss. That's extremely powerful. It's this intense concentration of magnetic energy that gives sunspots the ability to unleash solar flares of such magnitude. All of these magnetic forces combine and twist within the sun's atmosphere, creating tension that, if suddenly released, results in a flare or coronal mass ejection. So far, 4079 has been holding steady, but all of that built-up energy could snap at any moment. As always with the sun, nothing is predictable. Sometimes the quietest-looking sunspots surprise us the most. A few months back, there was a single-core sunspot that behaved just like this, totally calm and stable until it wasn't. Out of nowhere, it released an X-class flare right from center disk. That's the kind of unpredictability we're dealing with. So in the days ahead, we'll be keeping a close eye on this sunspot, the solar wind coming from the coronal hole, and any more surprises the sun may have in store for us. And of course, we'll continue monitoring Earth's geomagnetic and seismic responses as all these forces unfold together. When these kinds of solar explosions happen, they're powerful enough to disrupt the corona and send out what we call a coronal mass ejection, a CME. And from there, well, you probably know how that story usually unfolds. When we look at the magnetic field right now, its polarities appear extremely strong, which means this region on the sun has the potential to unleash a significant solar storm. So far, though, it hasn't released anything major. That's actually what makes it interesting. It's almost like the lack of flaring might mean the energy is building up, gathering strength in silence. Still, as always, we can't say for certain what it's going to do. Lately, there's been more mixing of magnetic polarity in that region than we saw just a couple of days ago. There's now a patch of positive polarity that's sort of wrapped by negative polarity, with a bit more blending happening in another area too, changes we didn't see 48 hours ago. The two central magnetic cores seem to be merging now. One part that was previously off at an angle has shifted upward, and there's been noticeable growth right in the middle, where before there was almost nothing. That central area is now filled with flux that wasn't there when the region first rotated into view from the eastern limb of the sun. Back then, we could only see two parts clearly. Now it's grown more complex, but despite all that complexity, it remains surprisingly quiet for now. So we're just going to have to wait and see if it decides to let loose with something major. Even though sunspot 4079 holds a lot of potential, it hasn't really done anything yet. That said, we're already experiencing heightened energetic conditions here on Earth because of the current state of the solar wind. If we look at the real-time solar wind data over the past week, we can see that Earth has been experiencing elevated geomagnetic activity. The KP index, which measures geomagnetic fluctuations at Earth's surface, shows that we've been riding a wave of heightened activity for several days. At the end of April, things were pretty calm. Then we saw a small uptick, just enough to bring us close to active conditions, though not quite reaching G1 storm level. But shortly after that, we did actually get a G1 geomagnetic storm, and we've been in that environment for a few days now. The storm reached its peak around May 2nd and 3rd, But even after that, it's continued, largely due to solar wind speeds climbing again. Right now, that speed is hovering around 800 kilometers per second, currently at 776, but some recent measurements even exceeded 800. Despite this high velocity, the density of the solar wind is quite low. We've been discussing how solar wind density could potentially be linked to strong earthquakes. For now, the magnetic field component of the solar wind has mostly settled back to normal. So it seems that the heightened geomagnetic activity we're seeing is primarily due to the increased speed of the solar wind. It looks like this energy boost will taper off soon, though there's another coronal hole that's rotating into a geo-effective position. If it lines up just right, we could experience another solar storm, perhaps a stealthy one. If the sun's most recent eruption has any impact on us, it'll likely be minor. Still, it could enhance the solar wind a bit more. Overall, we've been experiencing around 5 days of elevated geomagnetic turbulence. You might have been feeling this energy yourself. Humans are deeply connected to the Earth's geomagnetic field, whether we're aware of it or not. This field is actually a kind of master regulator for biological rhythms. It's tied into our circadian rhythm, influences heart rate variability, and generally plays a significant role in our overall health and well-being. Most people don't realize how much these invisible energies impact our bodies and minds. But if you've been following my content, you've probably heard me talk about it before. I even have a playlist that dives deeper into the links between solar activity, geomagnetic storms, electromagnetic fields, and human health. You'll find that linked in the description if you want to explore further. As I mentioned earlier, we've been in a geomagnetic storm for several days now. And if we turn our attention to seismic activity, we can see that this has coincided with some notable earthquakes around the world. According to USGS data, when we sort by largest magnitude, there was a powerful 7.4 magnitude earthquake that struck just south of South America. Alongside that, there have been numerous other quakes, some of them significant aftershocks reaching into the high 6 range. That 7.4 event happened on May 2nd, based on universal time. There was also a magnitude 6.8 earthquake southwest of New Zealand, which I've previously covered. More recently, we've had a magnitude 6 just west of South America, along the boundary of the Southeast Pacific Rise. On top of that, Mexico experienced a 5.8 magnitude earthquake today, and Texas saw a magnitude 5.4 quake, which is quite strong for that area. That one might be linked to oil and gas fracking, activities that can destabilize the local geology and trigger quakes, especially in regions that have been heavily fracked. Essentially, it makes the Earth more vulnerable to shifting. What's currently grabbing my attention, though, is a developing earthquake swarm just off the coast of Taiwan. This activity began today and includes a series of increasingly strong tremors. A 5.3 magnitude quake at 10:09 Universal Time, followed by a 5.7 magnitude at 10:53. There were also smaller ones, 4.7 and 4.5 magnitude. This escalation in magnitude is worth noting. Typically, 95% of earthquakes are main shocks, followed by smaller aftershocks. But in about 5% of cases, those initial tremors are actually foreshocks, warning of a larger quake to come. It doesn't happen often, but it does happen. And right now, this pattern in Taiwan is giving off that kind of feeling, so I'm watching it closely. Overall, though, we haven't seen a dramatic uptick in global earthquake activity since the 7.4 in the Drake Passage. Apart from that, we've seen the magnitude 6 quake off South America, the 5.8 in Mexico, and the 5.4 in Texas. Now we're keeping an eye on Taiwan to see if that swarm continues to intensify. Switching gears for a moment, the Schumann resonance data has also caught my attention. The data feed from the Space Observing System recently came back online after being down for about 36 hours. Interestingly, it went offline just as the resonance spiked to a very high level. The timing of that spike, especially with such a dramatic jump in the quality factor up into the hundreds, strongly suggests that the Earth could be primed for a high-magnitude earthquake soon. That kind of signal is rare but notable. We usually only see that kind of signal behavior right before high-magnitude earthquakes, so it definitely stood out. But what made this even more unusual was that the data blackout and the station going offline happened at the same time, which I've never seen before. It wasn't the typical blackout where we just have no data from that time frame because everything was down. In this case, we actually have all the spectrogram data intact, which makes the situation a little stranger. Looking at the data, there's nothing wildly abnormal going on. There are a couple of slightly anomalous signals, but those were already present before the station went offline. One small anomaly stands out. There's an increased intensity in the frequency range between 0 and 40 Hz. But overall, everything looks pretty normal. The quality factors have also returned to expected levels, and we'll take a closer look at that in a moment. Here's the most recent data, and from what we can tell, it seems like everything is back to normal. It's probably some kind of glitch, but to be honest, I can't say for certain what caused the Space Observing System to go offline or why we saw that spike in quality factor, amplitude, and frequency, and then why it suddenly disappeared. Now, turning to the quality factors over the same period, the spike that showed up around 2000 local time, UTC +7, on May 3rd is completely gone. The values are now sitting in a much more typical range. There is a slight rise in mode 4, which goes up to about 30. That's a bit high, but nowhere near what we saw before, where it was spiking beyond 500. Just for context, the quality factor measures resonance amplification. When we see those numbers spike, it usually points to an increase in energetic potential across the Schumann resonances, with less damping, which often signals that a large earthquake could be on the way. But now that spike is gone and everything's leveled out again. I can't say whether this was just a data glitch that led them to take the station offline for repairs, or if it was something else like a manual data alteration. That part is open to interpretation. What we do know is that, as of now, the quality factors over this 3-day period are completely normal. There's nothing that raises concern based on what the data is currently showing. At the same time, we're observing a series of subtle but intriguing anomalies within the Schumann resonance spectrum, as detected by the VLF monitoring station in Cumiana, Italy. Though the signals are faint and might easily be overlooked by an untrained eye, their presence is notable. They offer yet another piece to the puzzle of how Earth's energetic systems are interacting in real time. If we zoom into the current readings, there's a noticeable uptick in power levels across a broad frequency band, from the lower boundary of the Schumann resonance range at 0 Hz, all the way up through 105 Hz. This kind of widespread increase in amplitude isn't just random noise. It tells a story about the environmental conditions in and around the region. Much of this heightened activity can be attributed to intense thunderstorm systems currently sweeping across southern Europe. The Cumiana station, nestled in a region that's presently experiencing a high volume of lightning strikes, is situated perfectly to pick up the electric and magnetic signatures generated by this weather. Lightning isn't just a dramatic sky show. It's an immensely powerful natural phenomenon that broadcasts energy across an incredibly wide swath of the electromagnetic spectrum. When you witness a lightning flash, you're only seeing the visible light portion. which is a minuscule fragment of what's actually being emitted. These bolts also send out radio waves, infrared, ultraviolet radiation, and even higher frequency emissions that reach into X-ray and gamma-ray territory. It's a multidimensional burst of energy that saturates the environment with electromagnetic pulses. What makes the extremely low frequency, ELF, range so significant, and why we pay close attention to the Schumann resonances in particular, is that these waves travel unlike most others. While high-frequency signals are quickly absorbed by the atmosphere or bounce around chaotically, ELF waves penetrate deeply and attenuate slowly, meaning they can circle the globe with minimal loss of power. These low-frequency waves can form standing patterns within the Earth ionosphere cavity, essentially turning our planet into a resonant chamber. These standing waves are not transient. They're a consistent part of the Earth's electromagnetic environment, almost like a planetary heartbeat. When we see sudden fluctuations in these normally steady resonance patterns, it's like detecting an irregular rhythm in a heartbeat, something that demands attention. Historically, similar disturbances have been observed in advance of major seismic events. Though correlation doesn't always imply causation, the consistency of these patterns emerging before earthquakes has intrigued researchers for decades. There's ongoing scientific exploration into how shifts in electromagnetic energy, possibly induced by tectonic stress or pre-seismic gas emissions, might manifest in ELF fields. In essence, these anomalies could be early signals of geophysical stress, like the Earth whispering a warning before it shifts. If you're currently monitoring the data and see that distinctive spike in the vertical electric field, it's important to understand the context. Right now, it's largely the result of local atmospheric conditions, specifically the vigorous thunderstorm activity lighting up southern Europe. These natural occurrences inject bursts of energy that resonate throughout the system. The vertical electric field spikes when these lightning discharges travel through the atmosphere, exciting the ground-based monitoring systems like the one in Cumiana. While it's a potent, energetic display, it's not necessarily something to be alarmed about on its own. The good news is that the earlier red alert, which had raised concerns, now appears to be easing. Current readings show a stabilization across the frequency bands, and nothing out of the ordinary has developed. This brings a welcome sense of calm after the brief tension that naturally arises when we see anomalies in the global resonant field. Still, it's wise to remain observant. Space weather remains active, and the energetic conditions in the solar terrestrial environment are expected to continue fluctuating through the end of May. Solar activity, such as coronal mass ejections, CMEs, high-speed solar wind streams, and solar flares, can influence the Earth's magnetosphere and ionosphere. These interactions often modulate the Schumann resonances and other VLF readings. When combined with terrestrial sources like lightning, they can amplify or modulate resonance patterns in complex ways. As we navigate through this active period of space weather, it's entirely possible that we'll continue to see elevated power levels and occasional anomalies in ALF data. This doesn't necessarily indicate disaster, but it does signal an amplified state of natural electromagnetic activity, which can subtly affect human consciousness, emotional states, and even physiological rhythms for those who are sensitive. It's worth noting that many people around the world report feeling more physically or emotionally sensitive during times of heightened Schumann resonance activity. Though this connection is still under scientific study, there's a growing body of anecdotal evidence suggesting that the Earth's electromagnetic environment may influence human biofields and biorhythms. When the Earth pulses more intensely, some individuals experience sleep disturbances, anxiety, bursts of inspiration, or even unexplained fatigue. The interplay between human consciousness and Earth's natural frequencies is a fascinating area of research that continues to evolve, with implications that span from geophysics to holistic health. So while today's data doesn't point to anything catastrophic, it does remind us of the interconnected web of natural forces at play. It's a glimpse into how atmospheric events, solar emissions, and geophysical stressors all participate in an energetic symphony that plays out around and within us. Staying aware of these rhythms helps us stay tuned in not only to the pulse of the planet, but also to our own internal states, which can mirror these fluctuations in mysterious and often subtle ways. As we continue monitoring, we do so with both scientific rigor and intuitive sensitivity, knowing that Earth is an intricate, living system. Its signals are rarely meaningless. They tell stories, even if we don't always fully understand them yet. For now, conditions appear stable, the alerts are easing, and the fields are returning to baseline. Still, we remain watchful, not out of fear, but out of a deep respect for the Earth's language. It speaks to us in pulses, in waves, in electric whispers across the sky, and we are learning, day by day, how to listen more closely. As we enter this transitional window between lunar phases, there's a subtle yet steady intensification in the energetic currents flowing through our skies and our lives. While it might appear like a quiet week on the surface when it comes to major planetary alignments, the deeper currents suggest otherwise. There's a sense of building pressure, like the tightening of a bowstring, that signals something significant forming just beneath the calm. And so while the outer world may appear still, those who are sensitive to the energies will likely feel the quiet stirring of something just beyond the veil. Let's begin with something we've been observing for a while now, an expansive coronal hole that has remained active through multiple solar rotations. If this coronal hole remains prominent and stable through its 9th rotation, which should complete around May 17th, then it could mark a noteworthy point in our ongoing dance with solar energy. Coronal holes, as you might know, are regions on the sun's surface where the magnetic field opens up, allowing high-speed solar wind streams to escape more freely. These solar winds are no small matter. They carry charged particles across the vast space between the sun and Earth, influencing everything from our planet's magnetic field to our own energetic fields. These interactions can trigger geomagnetic storms, subtle shifts in brainwave patterns, and even deep emotional releases in those who are energetically attuned. May 17th isn't just another marker on the calendar. It's shaping up to be a threshold moment, one of those rare times when cosmic and solar energies converge in ways that ripple across multiple levels of reality. While this is a longer-range forecast, largely inspired by the pioneering studies of J.H. Nelson, who explored correlations between solar activity and planetary alignments, it is also supported by modern astronomical and astrological indicators. His work laid the foundation for understanding how alignments can influence solar dynamics, and this upcoming period fits neatly within those parameters. We're not saying it will necessarily produce a dramatic solar flare or storm, but the conditions are there, and the potential is real. It's a cosmic setup worth keeping a close eye on. But before we get to that highly charged moment later in the month, we have another powerful, energetic waypoint fast approaching: the upcoming full moon around May 12th. We're currently just past the first quarter moon, entering what's known as the waxing gibbous phase. In this phase, the moon's light begins to swell, illuminating more of the night sky with each passing evening. Energetically, this is a time of growth, momentum, and amplification. The lunar light, a symbolic representation of conscious illumination and emotional awareness, gains strength, casting clarity on what was once hidden in the shadows. This amplification doesn't just apply to light in the physical sense. It also translates to emotional, spiritual, and even physiological layers of our experience. As the moon moves toward fullness, its gravitational influence becomes stronger, and many people find themselves feeling more emotionally sensitive, intuitively open, and energetically alert. Sleep patterns can shift, vivid dreams may become more common, and long-suppressed emotions might rise to the surface seeking release. The full moon coming on May 12th is particularly potent, not just because of its usual energetic intensity, but due to its celestial positioning. It's nearly exactly opposite Uranus, the planet of revolution, surprise, and sudden awakening. Uranus is a wild card in astrology. It governs breakthroughs, genius insights, technological advances, and unexpected shifts. When the full moon forms an opposition to Uranus, we are being invited, perhaps even jolted, into higher awareness. This configuration can bring sudden revelations, emotional shakeups, or a sense of urgency to break free from limiting patterns. For those tuned in spiritually, it could be a moment of illumination or a lightning strike of intuitive clarity. This lunar opposition to Uranus can also play out on the collective stage. Social unrest, shifts in global communication patterns, breakthroughs in science, or even sudden earth changes, such as earthquakes, can be more likely during this kind of alignment, especially when amplified by other astrological and solar influences. It's as if the cosmos is gently, or not so gently, nudging humanity toward awakening, even if it arrives through disruption. Now, when we fast forward just a few more days beyond that full moon, we find ourselves standing before the much-anticipated alignment on May 17th, the Uranus Cazimi. In astrology, a Cazimi is a sacred and rare event where a planet is said to be in the heart of the sun, symbolizing a profound merger of energies. When a planet conjoins the sun within less than 1 degree, it's thought to be absorbed and empowered by the solar force itself. In this case, Uranus, the planet of sudden change and innovation, will be perfectly aligned with the sun. This is more than just a technical alignment. It's a moment of cosmic rebirth for Uranian energy. The sun is the life-giving force in our solar system. It represents our identity, our will, our life purpose, and our essence. When Uranus fuses with that solar force in perfect alignment, it becomes a spotlight moment for radical change, unexpected illumination, and quantum leaps in consciousness. This is the kind of alignment that can shake things loose in order to allow a new vision to emerge, both personally and globally. And as if that weren't enough, something even more fascinating is unfolding behind the scenes. Every single planet in our solar system will be involved in some form of alignment during this window. Whether through harmonic aspects like trines and sextiles, or more challenging configurations like squares and oppositions, all planetary energies are being drawn into the web of this cosmic convergence. This kind of planetary symphony is incredibly rare. When so many planetary bodies are actively involved, the overall energetic field of the solar system becomes more dynamic, more intense, and more activated. These full system alignments tend to correspond with periods of global shifts, breakthroughs in collective consciousness, and events that leave a lasting mark on human evolution. This doesn't necessarily mean that a single dramatic event will happen on May 17th, but it does suggest that the period around that date may serve as a trigger point or energetic catalyst that sets other things in motion over the weeks that follow. Let's also revisit the full moon again, because its effects can't be overstated, especially in a cycle like this one. We know from both science and spiritual traditions that full moons can bring about what's called tidal loading. This is when the gravitational forces of the moon and sun align in such a way that they exert stronger influence on Earth's crust and oceans, increasing the potential for seismic activity and even shifts in the Earth's magnetic field. But tidal loading doesn't just apply to the planet, it applies to us too. Our emotional tides, our biological rhythms, our inner energetic landscapes, all of these can become more amplified and reactive during this time. Think of the full moon as an energetic mirror, reflecting not just sunlight, but also the state of our inner world. It shows us what has been building, what needs to be acknowledged, and what's ready to be released. When the moon reaches its peak, it illuminates both beauty and shadow, calling us to see more clearly and feel more deeply. And all the while, that coronal hole we mentioned earlier continues to release a high-speed stream of solar wind, expected to reach Earth in about 3 to 4 days. These streams interact with Earth's magnetosphere, potentially creating geomagnetic storms. Even if these storms remain moderate, they can have subtle yet powerful effects on our nervous systems, our moods, and our sleep cycles. People may experience more fatigue, emotional waves, or heightened sensitivity. On the flip side, they can also bring surges of creative energy, downloads of insight, and a sense of heightened awareness. We're also watching sunspot group 4079 closely. If it remains quiet, then the primary influence on Earth's space weather in the immediate future will likely be this high-speed stream from the coronal hole. But space weather can be unpredictable, and even small sunspots can become active quickly under the right conditions. This is why we must remain aware and open, not out of fear, but out of respect for the dynamic and living nature of our solar system. In moments like these, where celestial alignments converge and solar energies stir, we are reminded of just how deeply interconnected we are with the cosmos. These are not distant or abstract events happening in some far-off vacuum. They are living movements of energy that touch our hearts, our minds, and our lives in profound ways. We are participants in this great unfolding, and the more we attune ourselves to the rhythms of the cosmos, the more we can move with grace and clarity through whatever changes may arise. So while this week may seem quiet on the surface, there's a much larger story playing out in the skies, one that calls us to observe, to reflect, and to prepare. The energetic buildup from the waxing moon, the electric charge of Uranus, the sacred solar alignments, and the ever-present influence of solar wind. All of it is part of a larger symphony that is guiding us toward a powerful shift. Stay grounded, stay attuned, and keep your heart open to the subtle signs. This is a time to listen deeply, not only to the cosmos, but to yourself. Because as above, so below. The heavens are stirring, and they are whispering messages of change, awakening, and transformation. As we move through the ever-shifting energies of the cosmos, there are moments when the planetary influences remain relatively calm, allowing us a brief window of respite. At the moment, the cosmic landscape appears quieter, with no major resonances in sight until the full moon on the 12th. This absence of significant planetary movements means that we aren't expecting any major geomagnetic volatility until then. The current state of geomagnetic activity is likely to ease up today, which could signal the start of a calmer stretch in the energetic shifts we've been experiencing. It's almost as though the universe is giving us a chance to catch our breath, to recalibrate and refocus before the next surge of cosmic influence arrives. In the grand scheme of things, this brief pause might be exactly what we all need. The intensity of recent solar winds and the increasing seismic activity around the globe have left many of us feeling drained and out of balance. Although global seismic activity has settled somewhat since the intense 7.4 magnitude quake in the Drake Passage, the conditions in space are still ripe for stronger earthquake activity. The solar wind conditions are still favorable for heightened seismic events, and it's difficult to predict exactly how long this calm will last. There's always that lingering possibility that the energetic pressure may begin to build again. But for now, it seems we've entered a relatively quiet phase, one that I hope provides us with the space to restore and regain our center. It's during these quieter times that we can truly focus on our physical, mental, and spiritual health. If the fluctuations in energy over the past weeks have left you feeling overwhelmed or worn out, now is the time to take a step back and give yourself permission to rest. When the universe is shifting and the energies feel turbulent, it's easy to become overstimulated, both by external events and the internal sensations we experience. But now, with this brief period of calm, it's important to activate the parasympathetic nervous system, the part of us responsible for rest, digestion, and overall relaxation. This system is the one that brings us back to a place of calm and balance, and it's essential that we nurture it during times like this. I've personally found that focusing on restorative practices, especially the small, everyday rituals that promote peace and tranquility, can go a long way in helping me maintain balance. One thing I always turn to is my all-organic herbal tea, which I've created to help support mental and physical well-being during these times of energetic turbulence. The blend I call spirituality is one I personally enjoy, as it carries a grounding, uplifting energy that helps center the mind. It's designed to help soothe the soul and bring clarity during moments of stress or uncertainty. Additionally, my tranquility tea is another personal favorite that I make to support deep rest and relaxation. This blend helps facilitate the kind of peaceful sleep that leaves you feeling restored, allowing your body and spirit to recharge. Each of these blends is handcrafted with love and intention, made with the finest organic herbs I can find, and is available for purchase on my website, wildfreeorganic.com. I pour my heart into these creations, knowing they offer nourishment for the body and support for the soul during times when energy is especially challenging. The goal is always to help you find peace and balance in a world that seems to be in constant motion. These simple tools, like a cup of tea and some quiet time, can be exactly what we need to navigate the energetic currents that surround us. But it's not just about the external practices we engage in to maintain our well-being. It's also about how we listen to our bodies and give them the space they need to recover. Yesterday, for instance, I made sure to give myself the gift of rest. I took a long nap in the afternoon, something I don't always prioritize but desperately needed. I made sure to go to bed at a regular time, and the result was one of the best night's sleeps I've had in a while. I woke up feeling grounded, refreshed, and deeply connected to myself. It was as if my body had finally had the time it needed to recharge and heal from the stresses of the previous days. If you've been feeling fatigued or out of sync with your usual energy levels, I encourage you to do the same. Listen to your body and allow yourself to rest. Rest is not a luxury, but a necessity, especially when we're navigating intense energetic shifts. Our bodies are constantly processing and integrating these changes, and without proper downtime, we risk becoming depleted or overwhelmed. This is a time to honor your need for peace, quiet, and stillness. As I rested, I also had a couple of interesting dreams. Now, I'm not saying these dreams are prophetic or that they carry any greater meaning, They could very well be just reflections of what's happening in my subconscious. But I thought I'd share them, as they felt unusually vivid and important, especially given the current cosmic context. In one of the dreams, I saw sunspot group 4079 producing a massive solar flare that was off the charts. In the dream, it was classified as a J-class flare, a category I coined in the dream that was even more intense than an X-class flare, perhaps something as powerful as an X100 or even more. I have no way of knowing whether this was just a product of my imagination or something that might come to pass in the future, but the dream left a strong impression on me. This dream, along with others I've experienced recently, makes me think about the powerful forces at play in our solar system. Sunspot group 4079 has been an active focal point for solar activity, and the idea of a massive flare feels plausible in the context of what we're seeing in solar behavior. While it's impossible to predict exactly what will happen next, the energy surrounding this sunspot has the potential for great intensity. It feels as though the universe is holding its breath, waiting for something big to unfold. In that quiet anticipation, there's a certain tension, one that builds gradually and may eventually release in a spectacular way. Similarly, I had another dream about a magnitude 8.1 earthquake hitting New Zealand. Once again, I'm not claiming this dream to be prophetic, but it certainly felt significant. There's a sense of something deep within the Earth shifting, as though the planet itself is undergoing some kind of transformation. It wasn't just the earthquake that stood out to me in the dream. It was the overall energy of the situation. It felt like we're in a period of quiet before a storm, like something is building under the surface, just waiting to be released. This feeling mirrors what we often experience with solar activity, where the pressure builds over time, and when it finally erupts, the force is incredible. It's interesting to think about the energy behind recent seismic events. The 7.4 magnitude quake that struck the Drake Passage was a significant release of tension, but there's always the possibility that something even bigger is on the horizon. When we consider the strange Schumann resonance signal that appeared a short while ago, it's clear that something was shifting. The signal, though anomalous, seemed to suggest an impending energetic event. However, now that the data has been updated, that signal is no longer present. Whether this is a sign that the energy has dissipated or simply that the conditions are no longer right for such a shift is unclear. All we can do is observe and remain mindful of the energies around us. In many ways, this is a time of quiet preparation. As we move closer to the full moon on the 12th, the energetic landscape will likely shift once more, and it will be crucial for us to remain grounded and centered. The forces at play in the cosmos are powerful and far-reaching, but we are not powerless in the face of them. We have the ability to choose how we respond to these energies. By taking time to rest, to recharge, and to activate our parasympathetic nervous system, we can build resilience and navigate the coming shifts with ease and grace. As always, I'm deeply grateful for your presence here and for the energy you bring to this space. Together, we can weather the storms, find peace in the chaos, and cultivate the strength we need to move forward. I'm sending you all peace, clarity, and ease as we continue through the days ahead. Trust that, even in the moments of uncertainty, you are supported. The universe is always guiding us, even when the path ahead isn't clear.